My name is Elizabeth Novogratz, and I'm the host of a podcast called Species Unite. And Pei has been on Species Unite before, and her knowledge and just her passion for all things animal as well as humans has just floored me since I first met her. And she's incredibly knowledgeable about what's happening right now in China with wildlife markets and all in connection to COVID-19. And since there are so many rumors and so much misinformation happening throughout the world, I thought it would make sense to get Pei on here and to really have her answer my questions and then your questions. So we'll start with just a basic getting an understanding of what's going on and also what we can do to support Pei and ACTAsia and to support some of these, just help things move along. So, Pei, do you want to say anything before we start?
It's great to have everybody here, and this is really strange time for all of us, really. Especially, I have seen almost like history restarted twice. It was the outbreak started in China. We see many people get ill, unwell, and now it's actually spread into, the West, particularly like in America and Europe as well. So most of us are in lockdown, but some people in China has, their life gradually back to normal, but it's a very surreal time for all of us. So I'm really grateful many of you, spend your time to listen, and it's truly global. We have people from all different places, in USA, in Europe, and we have people from the Asia part as well. So thank you all so much to join me today. I am the co-founder and Chief Executive Officer of ACTAsia. I established ACTAsia since 2006. So we have working extensively in China for the last 14 years. And the outbreak has, affected all life, but has, had great impacts about our work as well. And particularly in the last 2 months, we have working on the COVID-19 issue extensively. So I'm really glad Elizabeth invited me to do a special talk with everybody here.
Thank you, Pei. So I think we should start by just talking about the connection between COVID-19 and the wildlife trade. And if you could just give us information on that and some background, and then we'll go into specifics.
Yes, I think before we talk about the COVID-19, we should really look at the disease that have been passed from the human, from animals to human, by, because of the exploiting or overuse of animals. And that is from a case like MERS, Ebola, SARS, avian flu, swine flu. So the list going on. And particularly we know the cases like MERS and SARS, the intermediate host was from camels and civet cats. And so this is, give you the example, and also according to the OIE, the World Association for Animal Health, it have said more than 70% of the emerging infectious disease in these days in humans are zoonoses. So that's really are showing the cross, this new kind of virus is cross from animals to people. Of course, the current scientific evidence only, it just suggests the COVID-19 virus emerging from animal source. But the research is still ongoing to try to find what is intermediary host of COVID-19. The pangolins are the prime suspect in science at the moment, but mink could also be, be included as well, because that was minks was found in at the Wuhan market. So I think in a simple term is COVID-19 actually the virus, the COVID-19 virus jumped from, to a person from animal, from the nature environment, or these animal could be from the captive bred, intensive farms. This is what we, have established. And because of the wild animal, this is where resulted from our use of animals, our exploitation of animals. This is, where everybody is talking about now.
Yes, for sure. And all of these diseases, it's not, a lot of the ones in the past did not come from wildlife markets, or the wildlife. Swine flu came from pigs being farmed. And so as much as we need to look at wildlife markets, and that's what we're going to talk a lot about, it's all of how we treat animals globally. It's not just what's happening in China right now. It's what's happening in the entire world that needs to be readdressed, looked at, and shifted in major ways.
Yes.
But since we're on wildlife trade in China, will you tell us a little bit about the trade in general, and things that I think have confused a lot of people are what are wild animal markets? And then we can talk about what's been banned and what that actually means.
Yes. ACTAsia has focused particularly on education for last 7 years. We continue to do, education to children and consumers and professionals. When the COVID-19 started, we, started to look into more details out how do we communicate with consumers, the publics, and then we started really look into the trade in more details. And it's very interestingly, we found through our study is the trade in wildlife has been classified in 5 different usage. So the number 1 is wildlife used for food. The second is wildlife used for fur and clothing. Many of you know the animals are using for medicinal use. Then the 4th one is for viewing and entertainment, so that including animal performance. And the 5th one is animals experiments. So through these 5 different uses, that is under all the name of the wildlife trade.
Okay. And so when this ban happened in February, what did that mean?
It's very exciting, I think in the sense of the trade ban when this come out. It is really, really sad, outbreak. But the actually has, directly pushed to review the way we use animals and the trade in the market, the trade in terms of legislations. When the trade ban came out, I think globally we is very happy and very pleased with the result. But actually what the trade is in terms of what is it, like based on the 5 usage, I just say, is mainly on food. So it's banned the eating of wildlife. Of course, we welcome what the Chinese government have done so far, by, very drastic and fast decision, to discuss the issue in the National Congress in February, and then have the decision to, ban for eating animals, eating wildlife, and prohibited, want to focus more on illegal wildlife trade, and to want to ask people to eliminate the bad habit of excessive eating of wildlife. This is all very positive. But under this trade ban, we've got to understand there is only ban trading in food, but all other 4 uses still can be continued and carry on as normal.
So do the markets then where people buy these for the other uses, they still look the same, or has that shifted?
I think the usage itself, when we talk about the trade, we need to look at the bigger issues. The trade is the end of the products.
Right.
When
Okay.
it started as a captive breeding farm, this is the farm that's wild animals being farmed in intensive farming environment and settings. And so from the farming, breeding, rearing them and slaughtering them, if the usage now is not for food, they can be carried on as it can be. Of course, the decision on the MPC that was passed on 24th of February has given a good foundation. And also in last 6 weeks, more legislation locally, there's 12 cities and provinces have passed the ban of eating wildlife on the municipal and provincial level. And all this regional legislation has proposed, high penalty of what, animals should not be eaten. If they violated the law, they will be, punished, with a penalty. This is all positive, but in our view, there are some concerns within the current ban.
Right. So it's a step, is basically, with more steps to follow.
Yeah, that's a step. Yes.
And it's a good step, and it's being enforced. Yeah.
There has been many, enforcement have started, since February, locally as well, from, different parts of the China. However, like I said, the enforcement are mainly focused on these are animals if they bred for food, and wildlife animal bred for food, and what, in what extent they can be carry on or not carry on the eating. So there are several buts under this ban. Of course, we, like I said, they from the trade have been using for last 30, 40 years. Now we have this really sad but rare opportunity to really re-examine the current use of wildlife and then the trade situations.
Right. Okay. And what animals then are part of this ban, and what animals don't make it into the ban?
I think it's like we were asking the same question ourselves. And so the wildlife trade, the ban on wildlife trade is good, but what are the problems? There are several buts. The first but is using animal for food is no, but what kind of animals? So the animals they use for medicinal use, so such as bear bile, they can still be carried on because they are not for food. They are the bear for the bear bile. The civet cats, they are already identified as intermediate hosts for SARS. They cannot be eaten, but they still can be bred in farms. So civet cats, their fur can be used for brush pens, masks, for cosmetics. The fat can be used for traditional medicines. This will still be allowed. So that is really the concern will come. Is the breeding, rearing, slaughtering of this animal will continue to have the human-animal interface. So the chance of possible future virus outbreak that can be remains. So that is the problem with this. The second part is when wildlife are listed under the National Catalog of Livestock, then these animals can be eaten. So for example, Sika deer is listed as endangered species in China. So under the Chinese wildlife protection law, Sika deer actually have over just 1,000 in the wild as a very rare endangered species. However, Sika deer is also now listed under this National Catalog of Livestock and Catch Poultry. So we can see if the Sika deer is in the wild, they are protected. But once they become bred in farms, in these captive intensive farms, their skin, their antelope, the meat, and they all can be used for food, for medicinal use, also convenient. So this is a huge loophole, what we are concerning now regarding about this issue. So another 4 species in livestock is the animal used for furs. So raccoon dogs, silver fox, blue fox, minks. These are the animals now, they are classified as livestock. Once they become livestock, they cannot be eaten according to this new list, but the fur pelts can be used for clothes. And mink's heart we found is used for the traditional medicines. So that this usage is still carry on. So from 4th of April to 5th of April, that's 4th of April is last Friday, the government has just released, the Ministry of Agriculture, they just listed a consultation period for the public to submit their opinions about what, their suggestion of what animals should be listed under the livestock. So currently there are 18 livestock are listed as a traditional livestock. There are 13 exotic animals and wild animals, they listed under the special species. So these species are including a lot of wildlife. And come back to what my earlier concern is, if these animals are listed under the livestock, then they can be carried on to be bred and to be eaten.
So for a lot of these animals, there's not a lot of change happening, right? Or not yet?
Not yet. I think this is leading to two other concerns is the animals currently, especially the wildlife, they're currently listed under this ban, under the livestock list. They can carry on the practice. Right. And that's where come back to our, concern is then the human-animal disease, animal-borne disease would not be stopped. The future outbreak or the new virus could happen again. The other thing is, if I'm the breeder now, I'm breeding wild animals. For example, like blue peacocks, bamboo rats, beavers, snakes, pythons. I would, get together with the Breeders Association, try really hard to make my case to have my species listed under this livestock list.
Yes.
So because once your species are listed under, then the door will be open again and the business can carry on as usual. And also in future, if follow the government's new livestock criteria, it could add it, the new wildlife to be listed under livestock all the time. So what the problem is in the way we are doing now, even in China or in many other African countries, has blurred the line, bring in the livestock and bring the wildlife become livestock these days. And I think that's where it's really a serious concern to many of us.
Yeah, no, it is. And so how does this affect like everyday people's lives? Like how do people, are these bans really affecting or changing daily life? Do people see what's happening? Do you know what I mean? Is it something that people are actually really being forced to change habits, businesses, and like, because we keep seeing here at least, and I know it's a lot of misinformation but image after image of nothing's changed is kind of, we keep hearing these bans, but nothing's changed. And I know things are changing, and I know it's slow, but for just an everyday person, is this having an effect? And also having just gone through or still going through COVID there and then in the rest of the world?
I think we can look at this from two levels or two ways. First of all is, of course, everybody's life, has been changed, in the COVID-19 issues, the China in particular, the globally, we all, affected. Now we're in lockdown in Europe or in United States or in North America. The school are affected. There are only 6 places in the world is the kids can still carry on to learning. The most of them, they will have to study at home. So we are,
Right. No,
all affected.
I don't mean by COVID. I mean by the bans.
Yes, and I think that, but because of the life ban, the ban is the COVID has affected people's life. The people in China do started to think what is going on. The animals issue is always quite low priority in the country.
Mm-hmm.
But now he has jumped into the higher, position, and more people started to wear this, even in the terms of legislation. Normally to amend the legislation in China or pass a legislation take a very long process. Take years to change. And certainly with this ban, there has been change, the priority issues in terms of the trade, looking at the wildlife trade, look at how animals being used. That is one thing. How's the people's life? Now, what you come back to what you're saying is people are hurt. We started to have more opportunity to talk to people, and then we say pay more attention in a sense. But I think that the culture and the way the Chinese people viewing animals will need to be changed. The consumer habit will need to be changed. The challenge we are facing is the people may agree with the stop eating wildlife or stop consuming wildlife and the wildlife trade ban. They might say, yeah, we agree. However, in reality, is when they go to restaurant, when there is a bamboo rats on the menu, when there are frogs, buffalo frogs, when there's blue peacocks on the menu, would they feel, oh, okay, this is how caused the COVID-19? Where is that direct link? Need to be more, emphasized, and this is where we still have lots of work we need to work on there. And I think even myself, through this COVID-19, I look at some, wildlife products in a restaurant. So there is a dish is called hasam. Hasam is actually the frog fat and using in desserts. But they never say hasam. It's not like you say frog soup or frog dessert. It's basically, extracted fat used in dessert. I don't even know the name. I've never tested it. But until I look into it, I say, oh my God, this actually come from the frog. And so we need more people to learn this, what they're eating is, affected, the nature, and we're affected the species. And now they are actually affect our human health and public health. So I think that is where the people's life will need to be changed. And they are started to gradually and learning to understand this as well.
Which is awesome. That's great. And one more ban I want to talk about really quick is the dog and cat meat ban in Shenzhen. And now, was it yesterday in Zhuhai? Can you just tell us a little bit about that? Because that sounds like really good news.
As I explained earlier, the COVID-19 has, allow us, allow the government in China to review the use of wildlife, or use in animals in very different way. And so from, ban the use, the use in food have been banned. Then the second issue is what are wildlife? And through what wildlife is, they have to link it with this livestock list. This national catalog of livestock and poultry. So in this national catalog of livestock poultry, it was dogs was originally listed as livestock. And I think very positively come up from this COVID-19 is the government has decided to move dogs out of the livestock list. We hope this is going to be final. It will permanently move because we're still in the consultation period. Remember I said earlier, the list of the livestock is now under the consultation from 8th of April to 8th of May. In this period, people can submit, any opinions to support this list, or ask to remove certain lists, or adding more lists into the livestock. And so if the dog remain off, then the ban nationwide, it will have a foundation. There are 12 legislation, as I mentioned earlier, has been passed in China in regional level. Out of these 2 regional level, the 2 cities has, from the municipality, has openly stated, say, dog and cat meat will be banned in these 2 cities. The other 10 already, although they say wildlife, eating for food will be banned, they did not specify that. So I think we're very pleased, we remain optimistic about the current development, but I do not think we are there to celebrate yet, to a nationwide ban. So the 2 cities is good because they have openly, and these 2 cities are very significant because the 2 cities both are located in Guangdong, is in South China, and Guangdong is very famous for dog meat, and cat meat consumptions, and they're very famous for eating wildlife as well. So for Guangdong province to take in the lead, and for these 2 cities to take in the lead to say, and dog cat meat are banned, is certainly very positive.
That's great. That's fantastic. So should we take some questions from some of the audience now? And because we're getting a lot. Do you want to take some? I can read them. Let's start with one from Lee. Lee wants to know, are wild animal pets considered in the entertainment category?
Yeah. So should we just quickly go? I think everybody can see the questions as well in the Q&A sections. The bear bile action rejected. All right. So should we go? Right. Pet considered in the wild animal pets considered in the entertainment
category.
Right. I don't know what's wild animal pets.
No.
But they could be used for entertainment. In the current problem with wildlife trade, the animals are, for example, macaques, that's monkey. They are constantly used for animal entertainment. So they are these type of use. Some organizations in China are working on, and they want to urge the government to ban the different usage rather than just full animal. Certainly with ACTAsia, we have working on the fur farming issue for a long time, and the fur industry, it represents 70% of the China wildlife trade. Captive wildlife trade. So this is area we continue to push. We want the trade ban is just not banned on the food because it will not prevent the future COVID-19. Julie O'Connor is asking about the best course of action for other country government to take. I think this is really good questions.
Let's read the actual questions just so when people listen to this later, they know what the questions were. So what do you think the best course of action for other countries' governments or activists as to impacting China's behavior? Because in the US, we have politicians who sent letters to the UN, et cetera. So what are your thoughts on courses of action for the government?
I think it's many countries, has putting in more effort and pressures to the international organization, for example, OIE, WHO, United Nations, and even to the Chinese government themselves. And I think that's all positive, because the pandemic, the COVID-19 linked to the animals issues and the use of animals is no longer just one country's issue. This is a global. We are all interlinked. We are all in the same boat. If one sink, we all sink. So I think that's important. But I also do think we need to be aware. It's very easy just blaming China. I'm not saying China's blameless. Of course, China have to take a responsibility. But I do feel we all can, as activists, we all have to have a responsibility. For example, tell if you're vegan already, tell you're non-vegan, first of all, your people is outside they are not vegan, is what we are using, in, for example, the exotic animals, for example, fur products, if they still responsible for this, for these wildlife issues. The meat export, reptile export, they are still, come to the country like North America. The trade in wildlife is big, not only in China, it's global trade. It's a trade in a huge, represent a huge dollars. And I think we all had a responsibility to reduce our consumption. We still eat, the people in this part, they still eat pheasants, the Venetian meat is still being eaten, the frog's meat can be bought everywhere. So it's not only the problem in China. The only difference is probably is the wildlife market is not lively as, as obvious as the Western country. However, the wildlife market, selling live animal wildlife is not China on its own. In Thailand, in Vietnam, in Indonesia, there are still markets, they are selling live, wildlife. And these trade are still carry on as well. So we all need to do our bit. All these countries all need to tighten up the legislation as well.
Absolutely. I absolutely agree with you. And the next pandemic could come from anywhere on the globe, because nobody is doing things to prevent it in terms of how we're treating animals. The next question is from Malcolm. And he says, our research in Europe has found that cultural norms, especially in rural communities, are often powerful and difficult to be changed by new laws. In China, to what extent is the eating wildlife a cultural norm? And will it present challenging inertia in introducing change?
I think it's a really good question, Malcolm. Thank you very much. But I think we need to look at the using wildlife, particularly in the farm, setting, in the intensive farm, is not part of the culture. It is actually have been encouraged in last, 30, 40 years. And in part of me, I do feel empathize for some of these farmers, because they were encouraged to breed this wildlife, because it was the regional government, their policy to, lifted the property when the Chinese people have more protein source. So these days, when the ban is coming now, how they're going to, we need to come up maybe the sunset industry rule. How do we, transform these breeders to other, job roles? This is a problem, because otherwise all these millions of animals, where they're going, this is not something, is culturally they're using it. It's actually has breeding for commercial purposes. It's been using for, for few industry, a few farmers or breeding association, they profit. And, if we compare to the economic value, we were saying it was the value is 74 billion of the China captive breeding wildlife trade. Two, the pandemic has caused us, 2.7 trillion around the world. So you can see these economic figures is phenomenal in comparison.
Right. Okay, Roberto says, Peter Lee, associate professor of the University of Houston, has stated that most people who eat wild animals are the rich and powerful. How do you deal with these members of a class that has a great lobbying power in China to keep wildlife farms functioning?
I think Peter Lee is right in certain extent. Is a lot of white, it's rich and powerful. They want to eat more rare, unusual meat. However, they do have the other spectrum of, more lay people. They probably just, want to eat different type of animals. So I think it's both ends is what we need to tackle. And it's come back to, well, how do we use our painful experience for the future, to prevent for the future pandemic? And I think come back to what ACTAsia is trying to do is using this opportunity to consume, to educate the consumer and to really bring a true understanding of human, animal, and nature's relationships, and how, if we're not going to treat animal nicely, if we are continue to exploit animals in the way, not responsible way, we will suffer. And I think there's a long way to go. We're only starting, I have to say, there are more people starting to aware of this, but we still have a long way to go.
Okay. Lee says, mostly what has been generally reported in the US is that bats cause coronavirus. It seems like bats are the go-to wild animal to blame, while it allows the continuation of further exploitation of wild animals in medicine and other fields. Are there published studies to reveal what the virus is correlated to pangolins or other wildlife?
Sorry, I just want to read it. You mean the least question again? Most bats are good. I think they are asking a very in-depth question here. I think our job as a non-profit and our job as educators, what we really want is based on a scientific study, and we turn into the language we can communicate with the people within the countries. So far, whether it's from bat and to other wildlife, or it's like I say, whether it's pangolin or is to minks, is still under review, or still lots of research need to be carried on. And I would think, and I agree, that animals, the wildlife should not be banned, should not be only restricted in food. The use of other species, is the use of this species in particularly, the medicinal use is a huge problem. I definitely agree with that. The thing that I think I have explained to one reporter lately in front of the BBC is, for one, animals in Chinese culture, when you look at the value of it, so like pangolin is in danger, but it's also most trafficking animals in the world. The pangolin's meat is very high value, and if you Google in Chinese, it says delicious, it have high protein. Pangolin scale is using as traditional medicine. The cloth can be used for direct use. So it's one animals have represented various, value. The value is missing is the ecological value, the value in the wild, nature environment, the biodiversity, the ecosystem. This is where it's missing, and this is where the big gap we need to fill in, and to teach people in China, how do we allow them to understand it and make them understand this problem. And so the food is a good start, but we got so many other uses in wildlife need to be addressed. So it's concerned, in a way is good, but there's so many buts that's almost defeated what the good things have been happening so far. And I think before we go to Kate, I think it's good to mention here with what Paul is saying. Do you want to read Paul's question?
Paul says, don't you think the news about the wet markets reopening has been widely misreported, as wild animals are still widely on sale? I think the markets may be reopening, but aren't they only selling permitted species, domestic livestock like poultry, rabbits, and aquatic species, fish, crustaceans, etc., not covered by the temporary ban?
We have an article in ACTAsia's website. Is called COVID-ID's Q&A, and I encourage people to go to read it after this webinar. And Paul is right. When the wet market, the call to ban China's wet market, and it took myself days and to ask several of my Chinese colleagues, contacts, what does that mean, wet market? So in the end, I understand what the reason they call wet market. It was because when the outbreak started was identified in Huanan market in Wuhan. So the market is for seafood. So that's why they call wet market. I think that's what the lots of articles outside China now refer to wet market. Actually is referred to seafood market. And this seafood market in the actual life, in a real life, actually is wholesale market for the agricultural food. So the wet market could be part of the agricultural wholesale market. So where people sell meat, the livestock, and then sell vegetable, and it just could be just see as the open market, but in a bigger scale. And so to call for wet market, I think could be misleading in a sense because it's a wholesale market for all the agricultural food where you have people buy for day-to-day use. The problem with this market in the past is still selling a lot of, live animals. That is where the minks, deers, fox, or, the all different kind of beavers, they all could be in this market. And I think that's what the core is asking for, no wildlife, to be sold in this market. And then we come back to say, are we asking for all live animal to be banned, to sell in all market? And then this will not be just referred to China. It should be all, globally, every country, even in West America, in the west part of America, in San Francisco, in Los Angeles, there are still some live animals, for example, frogs, they will still be selling in, the market. So this is something we need to classify, and we need to understand what we're asking. Certainly, we have been called for the permanent ban for selling, animals in the live market, in this what we call wet market, but it's need to be addressed. But it should not be just for what they call wildlife. Now could be livestock if they are selling there. So can we sell these animals in livestock? I think that's what we call for. No, don't sell any live animals there.
No, I agree. And Kate wants to know, is there any discussion at a governmental level about farmed animals being intermediary hosts for zoonotic disease?
The answer is I don't know, but I think they could be and they will be. And I think we are all, in this through this consultation list, we certainly will address the issue. But come back to what I say earlier. How do we classify what is farm animals? Our traditional setting of one, understanding of farm animal, or what is the new wildlife now classified as farm animal. So this is where it become the blurry what animal is for what. So, for example, in this recent ban, one of the biggest loophole is the aquatic animals. So if the amphibian, so the animals like frogs, the animals, terrapins, including the when this type of animal, they would no longer be under the ban, so they can be still carry on, and that is still an ecological concern. There's still, there will be disease concern. So how we deal with this, and what's happening about snake and crocodile. This is something that will need to be discussed later, and I don't think has been really clear so far. And I think that's what a lot of people are now saying. If we, not, careful about all this, then we could go back to where it before. Although the heading seems really big about ban wildlife trade, but there is so many buts. Yeah. Then we go back to the square one.
Well, and that's the next question is from Anonymous. It says, given the loopholes in the legislation, do you foresee some real change, or will it revert to how it's been in the past?
Well, I think this is $1 million question. I still think on a bigger scale, this has been a very positive experience to, people of us, especially in China. I personally work on the captive breeding of wildlife 26 years ago. The captive breeding for wildlife, so this wildlife now farm in intensive farm for human use is always a minority questions, minority issue. It's never, when people talk about wildlife, they want to talk about the star species like tiger, bear, pangolin. So a lot of non-species, non-star species, they been used and farmed in, in same as the cruelty as, intensive farming, it's rarely discussed. And I think now this is all, pop up on the public eyes, and we can all be examined and discussed. And I think even this experience is really important. And we certainly will, using this opportunity to voice for these animals.
Nicola says, will the Chinese central government take any notice of world pressure to ban all wet markets?
I do believe, this is not just the pressure from West. I think is the challenge we are facing, within China and outside of China. And I do feel that the night market has been banned, but whether it's permanent ban or not, this is what we don't know yet. The wet market is, this live market, it was decided to be permanently banned in February. And we hope the pressure from all over the world, from not the major organizations like UN, WHO, or OIE could help to remain the ban as well.
Elizabeth says, what would you recommend the next most effective steps animal rights activists can take to change laws here at home in the USA with live markets? New York City has over 80 in operation. And as you said, this is no longer an Asian issue, it's global. Thank you for your time.
Yeah. Have a leverage part. Do you want to read the next questions? Do NGO?
Okay, yeah. Do NGOs or actors from the civil sectors have any leverage power to influence policy change?
Sorry, I guess you want me to Elizabeth, because she was kind of semi-answer, so I didn't feel. I think, lately there's someone from, there's an organization from West America. They have written to us, ask for, Los Angeles and San Francisco to ban for live animal, trade in America. And I think this is what you can do. The action is already started by organizations within America to talk about this global issue, the global wildlife trade. And if we all take in the responsibility, together with China we are trying to prevent the next pandemic. And I think that is like you were saying, is Elizabeth was saying now, this is a global issues. And regarding about genes issues, do NGO or actors from the civil society have leverage power to influence policy change in China? I do think at least there is a channel. For example, the consultation period has started. For example, when Shenzhen, before they pass their municipal level of legislation, they have a consultation period. They release article for the public to comment it. And the last week, the consultation period for what livestock list, it should be, and what people think about this livestock list has been open to everyone to provide a comments. And I think this is, very rarely to see these so close to each other, to have such an opportunity. And we feel we will definitely utilize these. And I think many, activists or many legal professions or people in the conservation groups, animal groups in China are all, working on this as well. There's more and more people every day. There are so many discussions within China is about what's happening, how to help. It's very new for many of them to see how to inject this and to put it in the legal system and with the lobby, the influence of policy, but it's starting, I think.
Good. And there's two more questions. We'll ask Anonymous first, because which is, what's your understanding about the role of the animal welfare groups in China for promoting the legislation of banning wildlife consumption after the outbreak of COVID-19? What's the opportunities and challenges?
The opportunity, I think I have explained, that they finally now there is, opportunity to allow us to raise your opinions, to submit a proposal. You can now try to find a People's Congress in locally or centrally to, submit a proposal. There is a lot to do. However, the resources could still be very limited. In terms of people powers or budgeting, that is still a challenge. We certainly feel it's really important to educate the public, to help them to, because sometimes most of the time the law is so far away from people's daily life. And how does the law actually implement what they can do and don't? And I think that's what our roles come in. And that's what ACTAsia has been making an effort to do this as well. So that is one thing we want to, we have been continuing to do it. We have been working tirelessly since, the beginning of February. We have series of articles in China to explain what is wildlife trade, what species, to enable the public to learn these are the issues they don't normally care or they don't normally pay attention to. But we are starting to do this. But I do feel this is not a quick fix. This will take time to resolve the shifting the concept of how we view animals, the relationships with animal, the use of animal. It will take time. How do you go to the rural part to educate these people? I think this is, everybody is trying to do it. From ACTAsia's point of view, we have our education program. We go to, we train the teachers to understand the issue and for them to teach the children. And we have, using the online teaching to reach the people in the rural part. So there are other organizations, they do different type of activities. I think collective, the whole, we can all started to say we are making more effort. Certainly, I think Karen is right, is we need to take education more seriously. We need to take education, we understand education is a fundamental change for the future. but this will not be see the result straight away. Of course, we need to catch up, or we might be using the COVID ID. We can now become more effective because people maybe pay more attention. However, this will not be changed overnight.
Right. And we have one more from Malcolm. The results of our study programs identifying the harmful effects caused to children exposed to public animal abuse are now informing the UN Committee on the Rights of a Child, which has been declared to end traditions and practices which have a detrimental effect on the well-being of children. Would you assert that children are exposed to emotionally impacting violence against animals in these processes?
I mean, what Malcolm here is talking about is the link between, the violence to animals to, their behavior and then their emotional well-being. And certainly we have addressed this when we were doing the teachers training in our education. We talk to the school authorities and parents to say, don't take the animal abuse as very lightly, because this does have an impact on behavior, but I have to come back, always a but, is to if the grown-ups, they don't understand themselves. So for example, for them to see animals to be stacked on each other and to be slaughtered, when there's no one tell this child to say this is wrong, this is very hard for them to understand what's wrong with it. So I was saying to people, I grew up to see, chicken was slaughtered, in the public, and when they were flipping around, their feather was taking off, by the spin machine. So we didn't think anything was wrong. The grown-ups didn't tell us it was wrong. The government didn't tell us what's wrong, because the animals are sentient and they are suffering. So I don't feel that was wrong when I was little, but now when I look back, I know that the whole process is not correct. So I think what we really need to learn is how do we change step by step by, changing different social agents within the society, starting from, for ACTAsia, starting from the school, starting from from influence school, the teacher to influence on the children, and change the consumer behavior. And we talk to the legal professions and vets to change. So there's several efforts have to inject it at the same time to make that change. To do things on its own in isolation will not make effort. That's what we keep saying. Shouting and screaming in China, it will make you feel good, but it will not change how how they behave in future.
And before we wrap this up, what will you tell us what we can do to get behind ACTAsia, and where, with this whole wildlife trade, COVID, the bans, everything, what can people do to support you and to support these bans?
We are working non-stop since this outbreak, as I said. We are working hard with, in terms of public education. We started to, make sure our lesson plan, including, the issue like, climate change, the biodiversity issue in the school. We are working, to review this, all the legislation, the wildlife protection law, and also the livestock base. So this is the area we're working on. We have no budget to work on the issue. We work on extremely limited resources. So if monthly donation can be supported, that will enable to do more to support. We rely on public, support. And now with the global economy, is really, really worrying for us. We feel, everyone's monthly support is definitely really important for ACTAsia continue to contribute our, unique experience, our professional opinions to, influence various stakeholders in China, and continue our education as well.
And for people who don't know, how can they find you?
Go to our website, is www.actasia.org. We have a special COVID ID appeal as well. And please, just click and share and donate to help us.
Pei, thank you so much for today. This was incredible and so informative, and just a real gift to have you here explaining all of this. So thank you.
Yes, and we're very, very, grateful for what you have given us these opportunities, and I hope people could support us and share our organization with others and become our monthly donors, please.
Thank you, and thank you everybody who came today. It was awesome. Thanks so much.
Thank you, and please log into our website and have a look.